Have you ever considered why a drowning person is often told not to fight the water? It seems counterintuitive, doesn't it? After all, in the face of danger, our instinctual response is to fight for survival, yet the paradox of drowning tells us otherwise. This paradox is an incredible metaphor for the struggles we face in life, particularly financial struggles. We tend to thrash around, panic, and let fear dictate our actions when faced with financial hardship. We fight against the tide of debt, the waves of expenses, and the undercurrent of economic uncertainty, often to our detriment. But what if we took a leaf from the paradox of drowning? What if instead of fighting we learnt to relax, to float and let the waves carry us? What if we learnt to navigate the currents rather than resist them? Just as in water, fighting against financial currents often leads to exhaustion and failure. When we find ourselves in financial hardship, it's like suddenly being thrown into deep water. The initial shock, the icy cold reality, and the overwhelming fear of the unknown can be paralyzing. Like a swimmer out of their depth, we thrash around desperately trying to keep our heads above water. Just imagine it. One moment you're strolling along the beach, the next you're floundering in the open ocean. That's how it feels to be hit by sudden financial distress. You're out of your depth, the shore is miles away, and the fear of sinking is all too real. This fear, this panic, is a natural human reaction. It's your body's way of saying, something's not right, we need to do something, and we need to do it now. But much like being caught in a riptide, fighting against the current of financial hardship can often lead to exhaustion and ultimately to sinking deeper into debt. In the throes of financial crisis, fear can cloud our judgment. We may make rash decisions like taking on more debt to pay off existing loans or selling assets at a loss just to stay afloat. These knee-jerk reactions can exacerbate our financial troubles, pushing us further into the depths of monetary despair. Think back to our drowning swimmer. If they continue to thrash around to fight the water, they'll soon tire and start to sink. But if they stay calm, if they spread out their body and float, they can stay afloat. The same principle applies to financial hardship. The more we panic, the more we struggle against our situation, the faster we'll sink. The key is to stay calm, to take a step back and assess the situation objectively. It's about understanding our financial position, creating a plan, and then executing that plan. It's about floating, not fighting. But remember, panic and fear only make us sink faster, both in water and in finance. What if, instead of flailing and struggling, we learn to float? Just as in water, the concept of floating can be an essential survival skill in the sea of financial difficulties. It is about conserving energy, maintaining balance, and letting natural forces support us. Imagine you're in the water. Panic sets in and instinctively you start to thrash about, trying to keep your head above water. You're fighting the water, but it's a battle you're unlikely to win. Instead, consider a different approach. Lay back, spread out, and trust in the buoyancy. You float. Now think of this in terms of financial hardship. When we're hit with unexpected expenses or a sudden loss of income, our instinct is often to panic. We might make rash decisions like taking on high-interest debt or selling off assets at a loss, which can often make the situation worse. Instead, what if we learn to float? Floating in a financial sense means remaining calm, taking a step back and assessing the situation. It's about understanding that while you may be in a difficult position now, it doesn't mean you'll be there forever. Floating also means having a financial plan or safety net in place. This could be an emergency fund, insurance, or investments that can provide income in times of need. It's about having a backup plan that can keep you afloat when life throws you a curveball. Moreover, floating is about patience and resilience. It's about understanding that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. It's about waiting for the tide to change, for the storm to pass, and knowing that when it does, you'll still be there, floating. So next time you find yourself in financial deep water, remember the art of floating. Keep your head above water, take a deep breath, and trust in your ability to stay afloat. Float on the surface of your troubles, don't let them pull you under. Scene script. Have you ever tried to swim against a strong current? It's an endeavor that can leave you exhausted, gasping for breath, and sometimes no closer to your destination than when you started. This struggle can be likened to the challenges we face when dealing with financial difficulties without a strategic approach. Imagine the current as the forces that shape our financial lives. These forces, or currents, include our income, expenses, and debts. Just as a swimmer must understand the nature of the current to navigate it, so too must we comprehend these financial elements to effectively manage them. Take income, for instance. It's the money that flows into our lives like a river feeding into the ocean. It's our primary source of financial sustenance, and understanding its regularity and magnitude is crucial. Is it a steady stream, or does it ebb and flow? Knowing this helps us adapt our financial strategies accordingly. Then there are expenses, the outgoing current that drains our financial ocean. These could range from daily necessities to monthly bills and unexpected costs. It's essential to track these expenses, identify patterns, and find areas where we can potentially reduce the outflow and conserve our resources. And let's not forget about debts, the undertow that can pull us down if we're not careful. Debts can be overwhelming, but understanding the nature of our debts, their interest rates, repayment terms, and how they fit into our overall financial picture, can help us devise a plan to manage and eventually eliminate them. Just as a strong swimmer uses the current to their advantage, a financially savvy individual understands these forces and uses them to improve their financial health. They don't just fight against the current, they navigate it, they harness it. They find a way to make the current work for them, not against them. Financial difficulties can seem like powerful, unrelenting currents. But when we take the time to understand our income, expenses, and debts, we can start to see a way forward. We can start to see how we can navigate these currents rather than just trying to fight against them. Remember, it's not about fighting the current, but learning to navigate it. What can the sea teach us about managing financial struggles? Just as the sea is vast and unpredictable, so too are the waters of finance. It's a world where a calm surface can mask turbulent currents beneath. Yet, despite these risks, we often find ourselves drawn to it like sailors to the siren's call. Let's take a moment to reflect on the lessons we've learned from the sea. First and foremost, the dangers of panic. In the face of adversity, our instinct may be to fight, to thrash against the waves in a desperate bid for survival. But as we know from the sea, this reaction often leads to exhaustion and ultimately to a greater risk of sinking. In our financial lives, panic can manifest as rash decisions or impulsive actions. We might hastily sell off assets during a market downturn or accumulate unsustainable debt in an attempt to stay afloat. But much like in the sea, these knee-jerk reactions often exacerbate our problems rather than solve them. The second lesson from the sea is the importance of floating. Floating is about surrendering to the water, about trusting in its buoyancy to keep us afloat. Similarly, in finance, floating means having faith in our abilities and the systems in place to weather the storm. It's about taking a step back, breathing, and making thoughtful decisions based on our long-term goals, rather than immediate fears. Lastly, we have the lesson of the current. The sea teaches us that sometimes the best course of action is to swim with the current, not against it. In the financial world, this can be interpreted as understanding and leveraging market trends, economic cycles, and the power of compound interest. The sea is a stern yet fair teacher. It doesn't promise smooth sailing, but it does offer valuable lessons for those willing to learn. It teaches us to remain calm in the face of adversity, to trust in our abilities, and to work with the currents, not against them. The sea has much to teach us, if we're willing to listen. And so, what happens after we've weathered the storm? After the tumultuous waves of financial hardship have subsided, we find ourselves in a sea of calm. It's a welcome relief, a pause in the storm where we can catch our breath and gather our thoughts. This newfound tranquility, however, isn't merely a pause, it's an opportunity, a chance to reflect on the struggle we've just endured. It's in these quiet moments that we can truly learn from our experiences. We can dissect our actions, our decisions, and our responses to the storm. Did we panic? Did we flounder? Or did we learn to float, to work with the current instead of against it? These reflections aren't just idle thoughts, they're the building blocks for better preparation, for a stronger financial foundation that can weather future storms. It's important to remember that every storm past is a lesson learned. After the storm, the sea is calm again, and so too can be our financial lives.